You have now been here for how long? 5 years?
Coming up to 5 years, yeah.
How has that experience been for you?
It's been a great experience. I was chatting with my predecessor, Michael, and I think both Michael and I have concluded that this is probably the best job there is in the world.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, no question about it. Absolutely no question.
What is so good about it? I'd imagine the pressure, the demands, you've been pulled from the other end.
Yeah, yes, there is that, but I think that's common for most CEOs. What's really exciting about the job is the challenges there are in the country and the ability to face up to those challenges.
Yeah.
So whether it's trying to help with insecurity issues, whether it's trying to help with drought issues, all of those things give us the opportunity to really step up, and that's what's nice.
And you've worked in many countries in the world, so Kenya being just one of those, where has been the country you've gone to, worked, and been like, you know what, I miss that experience, and don't feel like you need to say Kenya?
Well, every time I go back to a country, last week I was in Johannesburg, and I lived in Joburg for 4 years, and there's a kind of emotion that comes over you when you get back into the country, and it's negative and positive. So you look at Joburg, and I forgot how high the security walls were.
Yeah.
And I forgot this there's a sense of fear as you drive through the streets of, for me, as you drive through the streets of Joburg. And that I thought, I'm glad I'm not here anymore. I love the fact that the roads are smooth. Whereas when I was in Japan, Japan was really, really safe. But you felt such an alien. Even if you can speak a little bit of Japanese to get by, you still felt a bit of an alien.
Right.
You knew that you didn't belong there. Kenya has its drawbacks. The biggest drawback, especially after coming from Joburg last night, is the roads. The roads are just an appalling state.
Yeah. So each of them has a good and bad, just as life is, up and down.
Yeah.
And telecommunications industry, number of years now, approaching what?
Probably longer than you've been alive, I think.
I doubt. But when you were growing up, because when I grow up, I want to be a doctor, a pilot. What is it you wanted to do? Telecommunications? Was that what you were thinking?
No, I wanted to be a painter.
A painter?
Yeah. I still want to be a painter.
What had inspired that then?
I used to be, I used to be really bored in biology and history, and so during those sessions, I used to draw a lot, which would account for the fact that I didn't get very high scores in my A-levels.
Yeah.
And from that, I ended up, painting. And I was an okay painter. I think I probably still will be an okay painter.
Not too shabby?
No, not at all, actually.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I could look back and say, yeah, I could do that.
So where did you go to school?
Well, I started school obviously in Guyana, back in the West Indies, and at 16 I went to the UK and then adopted to an English system and English people and English weather.
Yeah.
And English sense of humor, which is probably the best thing about it.
Yeah. And telecommunications came knocking at what point?
It didn't come knocking, it was thrown at me by my mother.
Oh.
Because my mother says, your paintings are all well and good, but you need to find a proper job. And so she frogged to British Telecom in those days and said, interview him. And then she said to me, you'd better get through this interview or you're in trouble.
Wow.
So I give it my best shot, and so that's when I started.
Your first job was?
My first job was, it was a grade which is called clerical assistant. And the clerical assistant was the guy or the girl who did the photocopying. And photocopying in those days wasn't like these fancy machines.
It was more tedious.
Somewhere along the line, I'm not quite sure. So it was the office boy, if you like.
Yeah. So from the office boy, you started thinking, my next job, I'm tired of this one, is going to be what?
From the office boy, it was one of those companies that you could move through and do different functions, as you go through. So from there, I think I went into purchasing. I can't remember the sequencing. And then I did corporate videos for a while. This is when we used to use 16mm film. When you go home, you can Google that and see what that is. when we used to, so Kodak in the days of Fuji and stuff like that. So we did that for a while, and then that got boring. And then moved on and finally ended up doing more of a marketing product manager job. And that was what finally put me on this kind of path. Yeah. So I was a product manager for answering machines and cordless phones. It was the days when cordless phones were like, if you had one at home, you know, you were it.
Yes.
And I always had the prototypes at home.
Okay.
And then from there, moved into mobile phones.
Until now.
Until now.
And we'll get to talk about Safaricom and all, but out of work, what does Bob Collymore do?
You know, I was chatting with some other corporate leaders the other day, last week, and we were saying that the way to get a work-life balance is actually to really enjoy your job. And so, and I do, you know, it's not because I'm forced to get up tomorrow morning. I have to get up tomorrow morning, Saturday, at 6 o'clock, so I can hit the first appointment and then tied up for the rest of the day. So you have to really make your job meaningful. And if you do, then your work-life balance.
So you're saying you're all work, no play?
Well, sometimes work is play, as you would have noticed in the Furi dance.
Yeah, I know, right? So what's your typical day like? You'd wake up, what, gym, office, gym later? How is that?
Well, I wake up at 5:15 in the morning.
Every day?
Every day.
Weekday or even weekends?
Even weekends, because I can't sleep in anymore. If I'm doing it 5 days a week, then I might as well do 7 days a week. And then I have a gym at home, and I go to the gym, and I watch you, actually.
And I hope you're not just saying that. What segments do you watch?
No, I watch you from the time you come on, which I expect it to
6.
be at 6, but it is never 6.
It's
usually
6.
after 6, no. And you know me and punctuality is like.
Okay.
And I switch the thing on.
Maybe your watch is ahead. You need to.
No, because what I do, if you really want to know the details, right? So I switch on the TV, obviously before 6.
Yeah.
So I catch the sports news on BBC, and then at 6 o'clock I switch over to KTN. Now, the other stations watching, it's true, I do.
Yeah.
I switch and I watch you and what's your colleague's
Michael.
name? I watch you and Michael. And I'm saying, it's 6 o'clock, why aren't you on telling me the news now? And so I watch that until about 6:30.
Okay.
Then you get into the newspaper review, and then you get the chat show and stuff. And at that point, I would switch over to something else. And I'm out of the gym at about 7 in the morning.
Okay.
And then, you know, do my stuff, grab a quick bite, and I'm on the phone with Koi and the team at about, at 8:15 in the morning, and we kind of review what was in the media, what's in the printed media, the electronic media, the blogs, and the online media, what are staff saying, because we have a thing called Seminar CEO, so we have a roundup of the sentiments that staff are, things that staff are talking about, and that determines, you know, what are likely to be the hot points for
that
the day,
yeah.
right? And then we agree what the position is. The team, of course, would have been up much earlier than that in order to prepare for that call. That call takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
So every day you have a pulse pretty much of what everybody's thinking about Safaricom. Are they celebrating? Are they unhappy? And also in the office, how everyone is doing.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot that's said. Every day we're in the media. And so we listen to the radio, TV. So you can see I haven't read the newspapers for today. I don't have to read the newspapers to know what's been going on because we were on the call this morning.
Okay.
And we know what's upsetting customers, or, you know, sometimes what customers are happy about.
Yeah. Maybe you cannot make them all happy.
No, you can't. But you should try.
Yeah? What's your favorite food?
My favorite food? Free.
Yeah. What?
Free food.
Free food.
Any food which is free. My favorite.
Okay, so ugali, matumbo, and spinach.
So
if I give that to you.
Yeah, so let me just be upfront about it, because you accuse me of just saying that Kenya is my favorite country because you're here. Actually, I don't like Kenyan food very much.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is, you know, just part of my honesty.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
What's your favorite food?
My favorite is probably Indian and Chinese. So it's more Asian kind of fusion kind of stuff. Okay. So, and there's some nice restaurants here that serve that stuff up.
All right, so let's talk Safaricom. Good times recently, profits, app. You have 2 extra years. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's probably more about how do you feel about 2 extra years of listening to
Bob.
We feel that the results were okay. It could always be better. You know, it could always be better. I think it was, broadly speaking, where we expected it to be, but we wanted it to be better than that. You know, net profits were up by quite a good margin. Dividends were up, which is pleasing for customers. But what's important for us is that, you know, we now have the scope to continue to invest in the industry. So we invested about 30 billion shillings last year, and this year it'll be about the same. And you know, that's all about trying to give the customers the best experience, which is not always the case, for sure. But you know, we're investing now in 4G. Even for 3G, we're moving the coverage from 67%, I think, to 80% this year. So more people will have access to you know, richer data experience. 4G, we've just rolled out 4G in Nairobi and Mombasa, and we're doing it into the rest of the country. So, you know, it's good that we can continue to invest in the country. There's some big projects. You know, bringing M-Pesa back home was a massive project, and we're still in the settling down period. And I think by the time we get to July, August, you'll start to see some nice new functionality coming in, stuff which, you know, as customers you would have been asking for many years.
Like what?
You know, my favorite is going to be name search. And we're just trying to work that one through the regulators at the moment. And what that is before you send money to me, if you ever were unfortunate
M-Pesa
you can just put my number in. But sometimes you put the wrong number in, right? And you would like it to say Bob Collymore before you hit the send button. And so that's the functionality which we're building into this. And we're just, as I said, currently taking it through the regulator to make sure they're happy with that. Because that's been a big pain point for customers. So that's been a big project for us. The National Police Project has been an important project.
An important project that had quite a number of people raising a few questions, and we'll get to all of that. But the 2 years, did you expect an extension? Did you want one? Are you surprised by getting one? How does that work?
No, it doesn't quite work like that.
How does it?
I think the board and I discussed this, and we felt that 2 more years would be right, so we get the succession plan in place. We've got a pretty good succession plan across the organization. So you see, when people like Njoka Waita left recently, people were surprised that you know, we were able to appoint his successor straight away. But Steve Shege was always anointed as his successor. So we have a succession plan across the whole organization. And we just want to make sure we got the right development plan in place.
So had you not finished your succession plan by the end of the 2 years, and so you're still working on it as you continue with your 2 years?
No. I think 2 years is enough. I think really, and you know, just to commit it on TV is an important thing. I think 7 years is long enough for a CEO. And at the end of 7 years, I will leave. That's not an option.
So you're mentoring someone? Do you have someone identified?
Yes, we do have people.
People?
You have to give the board a choice. You know, I think if you look at KQ, I remember speaking to Titus a long time ago, and Titus said that he had brought Mbuvi in, and you know, he wanted Mbuvi to be the successor. But the board still went externally to make sure they were choosing the right person. So in the end, they chose Mbuvi, and you know, they're now very confident that he is the right guy.
Yeah.
And the same will happen here.
Okay.
The board will have an option of an internal candidate, and then they can choose externally if they so wish. But it's my responsibility to give them that option.
So 4G, TV as well, a new frontier. What inspired that?
So let me deal with 4G first, and then deal with the perception around TV, because that's important. And I spent the last few weeks trying to say to people that we're not actually getting into the TV business.
Okay.
So 4G is just the next generation of mobile telephony. You know, we had 2G, now 3G, now 4G. Some people call it LTE. LTE, long-term evolution. It was a catchy name. And it just gives you speed, right? So if you look at you have an iPhone. So that phone will give you speeds typically between 10, 20, 25 Mbps. So it gets rid of the buffering thing. But importantly for 4G, if you want to have any kind of broadband experience, especially at home, get faster speeds than you get from Edge. You get E at the top of your phone. Yeah. Edge or even 3G sometimes can be a little bit disappointing. And it's where the world is heading, right? Now, part of the police project that we did, government chose to pay for that, if you like, by selling us some spectrum. Spectrum is the airwaves that you use, and we've used that to deploy 4G. We're also using some of this existing spectrum to do 4G.
All right, so 4G now is Nairobi?
Nairobi, pretty much all of Nairobi is covered now.
Yeah.
I think we have about 240, 250 sites rolled out. Nairobi and parts of Mombasa.
Okay, and you're saying you want to set the record straight on this whole TV business. So what's going on?
It's a data story. It's not a TV story.
Big box.
The big box. So, in order to get TV now, you need to have a TV decoder, a set-top box. Right. So everybody needs to have it, unless you've got a digital TV, and there's not many of those around. And we said, well, if you need to have a big box, if you need to have a decoder, why don't we put a router in that box? And a router is just the ability to deliver you data via the box, right? Or it's like a modem. So it's putting a modem in the box, and then the router allows you to connect up to 10 different devices to that box. That phone in your hands can also act as a router. So I can tether my laptop to your phone and use your data bundles. And so what it does, it packages a data bundle in the box, and it says you can take it home, TV, you can also get a discounted data bundle. And those bundles can be as big as 50 GBs. And I think 50 GBs is 4,000 shillings. So it's heavily discounted because it recognizes that you don't want to move around with this data. It's in your home. You can connect your iPad, you can connect your laptop as a Wi-Fi connector, and that's all it is.
So with the free-to-air, because many have been wondering, so now Safaricom is getting into the TV business, will we see them start producing content? What does this mean going forward? So you're saying that is not a direction you're going fully in terms of embracing TV and getting into content production and all of that?
But it's been exciting for a while, because lots of these showbiz types have been pitching up at our office.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
They've been coming and saying...
Everybody wants to come and make movies and do TV shows. No, we're not doing that. I mean,
you're not going to do that?
And we've been very clear. We've also spoken with our media colleagues. We're actually a very big advertiser in Kenya. And I sat down with all of the media houses, and I shared this plan with them as long as a year ago. So they all know what our plan is, and we're honest to that plan. We want to put as much content as we can, and so we're very happy to put KTN's content. Actually, we do deliver KTN through the box. And anyone else who wants to put their content in the box, it's just a free-to-air option. So
the security project as well that you got into with the government, and initially the challenge and the questions around that, it was just pretty much handed to you, and now you've been working on it. Kenya continues to deal with that as a challenge, security. Again, where are you now? What is it you've been able to work on so far and deliver, if at all?
Well, you have a very, we have a very demanding president. And so, and he pins you down to timetables, timescales, and to deliverables. And he pinned us down back on the 11th of December. I remember the date clearly. On the 11th of December, he says, I want to come back on the 25th of May. And I want to see the following. So, actually on the 23rd of May, because it was last Saturday that he came in, and we were able to show him what we've done. And what we've done is we've built the integrated command and control center. And if you go there, you'll see the ability to take emergency calls, the ability to dispatch officers to those sites, and the ability to have a crisis management room. So the crisis management room is a wall of screens. And you can see what's happening from 1,800 cameras. We haven't done 1,800 cameras yet. I mean, that's by phase 3. But phase 1, I think we're now up to about 700 cameras, 785 cameras actually has been
Have they been mounted?
To date. Mounted, yeah. Okay. Nairobi, if I show you what they look like. you'll then start to recognize how many places that we've got them. So these are poles with cameras. They're also mounted on buildings. They're mounted on highways. They're mounted at some critical, critical installations. And you can, from that one room, see what's happening from any one of those 1,800 cameras, and you can track. So, I can zoom in at an amazing rate. And we were demonstrating this to the president, that you can see a picture of a newspaper vendor. You can get all the way down and you can read the newspapers. So, many people complain about Big Brother's watching, and I think many people have also said we're glad that Big Brother's watching, because now we can feel a lot safer. We're also now looking at how we can do some...
And what do you say those who have a problem with Big Brother watching? Especially Safaricom being put in that place, because also you have a lot of information, people who are on Safaricom and who feel you have all of this information. Could it in some way end up in a system that shouldn't be there? Is the information safe with Safaricom now working on these other projects?
The first one is the Safaricom Engagement in it. The Safaricom Engagement is to provide the network, much the same as we provide the network that your mobile phone is working on, and we will provide that and maintain it. The people who use it is the police force. So it's not about Safaricom looking at that. The second issue is around whether you think Big Brother watching is a good thing or a bad thing. I think that depends on who you are. I would rather know, and look, I visit a lot of cities, and in some cities I feel much safer than others. And usually the ones that I feel safe in is the ones where I can look up, I can see a camera is watching me, because the camera is looking out after my interest. Now, if I was up to no good, then of course, I wouldn't want the cameras there. So I think there's a kind of naivety attached to that view that says, our privacy is gone. So that's the second issue. The third issue, which came up in that series of questions, is Safaricom does have access to a lot of data, as does most other mobile phone companies, but actually lots and lots of people have lots of information about you. Google is a good example. Have you ever noticed that when you travel, when you're in Johannesburg and you Google, immediately it comes up with a co.za. It's not the Kenyan Google, because it knows who you are. And Google knows who you are, which device you're trying to access it on, what you specifically try to access. So whether you access it on your laptop the last time or your iPad, and now you're accessing it on your phone, Google knows that. And it knows where you are, knows how often you've accessed and stuff like that. So the next thing is, can people misuse it? The answer to that question is yes, they can.
So you're saying people could misuse the information you have, the data you have, as Safaricom, as you engage in this project, that could be misused. You can't give a guarantee.
No, I'm breaking it up. So the first one is to talk about the security contract. So the security contract provides the network. And that's the network which provides communication between the police, amongst the police. And it provides images from cameras to the police. So that's a standalone thing. And they have access to all that stuff. We don't have access to it. And no one else has access to that. And because it's an LTE, and it's actually advanced LTE, not even the LTE that you would be using, it's actually pretty secure. And that's entirely down to the security services. Then I'm talking more generally about issues of data security and data privacy. And that's a big issue. It's one of the biggest issues that's facing CEOs and corporate leaders across the world. So whether you're talking to the Bank of America, or you're talking to Microsoft, or you're talking to Safaricom, whoever you're talking to, the thing which keeps me awake at night, and there's a classic question that you guys would ask.
Yes.
What keeps you awake at night?
Yeah.
Usually the answer I give is my next door neighbor's generator. They do need to fix that generator. But the thing which keeps most corporate leaders awake is cybersecurity, because the bad guys are getting smarter, and the amount of hacking attempts that mobile phone companies are getting daily, really, they amount to the millions, and they only have to crack through once. And so cybersecurity is something which really does exercise my mind, and I'm sure if you speak to my colleagues here in the mobile network operators, they'll tell you the same thing. So, there's so much information that's sitting there, whether you want to crack into people's bank accounts, whatever it is, cybersecurity is a real big issue.
Yeah. What assurances do you give as Safaricom, even as you work with government on this one? Because in terms of trying to put up cameras before, we've seen those projects come and fail, starting with the Metropolitan, which then transitioned to the Nairobi County government, over 400 million shillings down the drain. We just have stuff that's put up, but that's not working. So what do you say about what you're doing now, and reassurances you'd give that this is gonna work, this is not gonna be money wasted?
Well, the biggest assurance that you can get as a taxpayer is that you actually don't pay anything for a while. So if it doesn't work, government ain't gonna pay me. Because our commitment to government is we will fund this entire project. 15 billion shillings is not an insignificant sum of money. So we're paying the 15 billion shillings, 14.9, and government doesn't start paying for another 2 years. So if it doesn't work, you're not going to be left with a white elephant. I'll be left with a white elephant. Of course, I have the confidence, or else I would never have done it. Of course, you can see that it's working. And the reason why it is really important for His Excellency to go and see it himself, and you would have seen the articles in the papers, and probably the video images as well, where he and the Cabinet Secretary and the PS and the IG and lots of other people went, and they saw it live. It's actually taking calls. We switched over, I think, last week, Friday. So all emergency calls in Nairobi is being routed through to that command and control center, and it's being handled from there. The devices, 6,000 devices, are now out in the hands of policemen, and they're responding to it. And those devices, it's not just a voice device, it's an image device. So, the control center, for example, can capture from the screen and relay that onto the handheld device of the policeman who is on the ground, so he can see what they're seeing from the control center. And all of that is live and working. So phase 1 has been delivered. Phase 2.
And it's being used now.
And it's being used, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the feedback, and when you engage with the police and what they're saying, in terms of the significance of it, what it has been able to advance or help them mitigate on, what is it they're saying? What is the difference of having this now as opposed to where they were before?
Well, I would say that, if I can step on a line a bit, I would say there was a bit of resistance at the beginning when we were only talking about it. But when you walk through that center today with police professionals, they're like, wow, this is going to now make our life so much easier. The next step is about the analytics. And so, if we want to find you, right now what they'd have to do is they'd have to issue paper pictures of you and give it to every policeman in town. Today they don't have to do that. Well, we're not quite yet, we're working on this bit. But they will take a picture of you, they load it in the system, and 1,800 cameras will go searching for you. And it will recognize your face and will then say, here's Sophie, she's in South B. That's where she is, you can go find her now. And that takes away the kind of the manual intervention. So very smart systems. Whether you speak to the CID, you speak to the even NIS, those guys are looking and thinking, this is what we need, because it's best in class.
Yeah, and are they training people to be able to exploit all of this? Because the thing, you look at the entry level, the academic qualifications to get into the service, very low. So again, you could have this excellent system, but who's working on it?
I think that's a very good question. That's a very good question, and it's a question which His Excellency has been exercising his mind way back the last year, because this thing has been talked about for more than a year now. And it's a question that he asked. And the way we've addressed that is ensuring that we train. So far we've trained about 2,000, just over 2,000 officers. And we're going to continue to do that over the course of the coming months. So eventually all officers would have been trained. And it's a 2-day training program just to use the device. The people in the command and control center are a different class of people, different breed of people. They're very much more experienced in that space. So yeah, a lot of effort is being put into ensuring that we recruit the right people for that job in the command and control center, but also that we train the people in the field to use this. And there's always human resistance. We engaged a consultant from the Metropolitan Police in the UK, and he said we had the same problem in the UK, where human resistance to change we had to overcome it.
So when do you deliver fully, completing all of this work that you need to do?
It comes in 3 phases. First, phase 1 was delivered 2 days early. I reminded the president it was 2 days early.
Yeah.
Phase 2 is August, and phase 3 is November, when we wrap these 2 cities.
Yeah, and you're confident when you're done, this will change in terms of Kenya's standing and how she approaches security matters. Do you think this will be that thing that takes us a step ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm absolutely confident about it. A question which is frequently asked of me when I'm overseas is insecurity in the country. And I'm convinced, and I'm no security expert, that's the first thing, but I'm convinced by what I see that government is taking it terribly seriously. You know, the thing which I talk to government about more than anything else is actually about that project and how we can expand it and how we can improve functionality. And I think that the capabilities the system will deliver, I think will all make us a lot safer. And when you drive home tonight, just look out for the big white poles. And once you start to see them, you will start to realize that we're seeing much more centrally of what's going on out in the field.
And the vandals, are you not worried about those? We see a lot of work put up, and then, you know, after one, yeah,
I'm worried about them. But I'm also worried for the vandals' own safety. Because if you're stupid enough to pull down a pole that's got a camera that's recording you, we're going to come and find you.
You're going to find them. Okay.
It's that simple.
It's that simple. In terms of the industry and the other players, Safaricom has got a bit of bashing from some players talking about the issue of dominance, that you unfairly are dominating the industry and that there needs to be a declaration that you are way past, you know, what is allowed in any market. And you have always argued that this for you has been organic. But you continue to expand. Don't you see there being any merit in that argument, that Safaricom, in any move, any action or inaction, impacts on the industry, and that for other players it could be seen as unfair?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to comment on what my competitors say, because, you know, they run their business, and you know, their narrative is not mine. What I do say, and let me answer the question in a slightly different way, because the way that question is sometimes asked is they say, you know, aren't you too big? And my answer is, how big do I need to be in order to compete with Google? Or how big do I need to be in order to compete with Facebook or WhatsApp? Because competition actually doesn't come in the linear way that it used to. Competition comes from everywhere. And in order to deal with that, and Google is a competitor, you know, also a partner of ours. WhatsApp, we partner with them in some areas, and we will compete in other areas. And you know, I think when people start to be too narrow-minded, small-minded, you know, you will confine us as a nation, and indeed as a continent, to only fighting the small battles when the big battles are being fought. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples, and both brands that I admire quite a lot. One is Easy Taxi, and one is Uber. Right, so Easy Taxi is fairly small. They've been running for a while, but they have to compete with a company called Uber. Right. Uber is worth $17 billion. It's only been running for a few years. How big do you need to be? Because what I'm saying is the competition now is global. It's not local. And you know, I believe that you need to support local players. You know, whether it's Safaricom or it's, you know, you pick another one, 7Seas Technology. You have to encourage 7Seas to compete in Silicon Savannah, not to compete in River Road. And so, you know, I think that it tends to be a bit of a small-minded argument around you know, how big Safaricom is, and you know, what else is Safaricom getting into. The next question that investors ask is, you know, isn't voice flattening out, and aren't you therefore worried? And we say, well, of course we're not worried, because voice will flatten out and voice will decline. I mean, it's a fact of life. But then you've got some other stuff that you're doing. You know, you've got data, you've got M-Pesa, and you've got all those other things you're doing. So you have to keep moving before the world comes and disrupts you.
So are you moving then to be able to cater to this kind of changes? And don't you also worry that as you move, that you could move too much away from your core business and then be all over the place and lose that one thread that connects you to your customers?
You're asking some good questions today. That's a very good question. You know, I think when you move 1 degree away from your core, you have about an 85% chance of success. When you move 2 degrees, that becomes 50%. When you move 3 degrees, it becomes 15%. And therefore, what you're saying is absolutely right. You need to make sure that you're taking one step at a time. So when we moved into mobile payments, that was one step. It was a big step, but it was one step. If we move from mobile phones to banking, we would have had a 50% chance of success. We didn't do that. And the way we did banking is we worked in partnership with banks. So we do need to be careful that we're not jumping too many steps away. It will only ever, whilst I'm the CEO, it will only ever be one step at a time.
At a time. All right, and M-Pesa has become huge. I mean, bringing back the servers home. Is there thinking towards getting it to be its own entity, or is it still going to be? Because it looks like it's outgrowing, the whole core business.
Yeah, so, anecdotally, that's how it feels, but the reality is that M-Pesa is still only 20% of our revenue. Right? So we still have 80%, which is not M-Pesa. And then we have data, which is growing at 60% year on year. And if that continues to grow, that will at some point maybe overtake M-Pesa. So M-Pesa, as you think, on a world stage, M-Pesa is really quite an important phenomenon. It's not in terms of scale. I mean, we talk about how much GDP goes through it, but the fact is that you can, if you're sitting with corporate leaders and some of them, leading thinkers in other parts of the world. I said to you earlier, I was in Seattle, right? And you speak to, whether you speak to Warren Buffett or you speak to Bill Gates, you speak to any one of those big names, they know about M-Pesa. So that's why M-Pesa seems as large as it is, but it isn't. It's 20% of our business. And what many banks are now figuring out is that M-Pesa is a good companion for what they want to do. So if you look at what we've done with KCB, what we've done with CBA, and indeed what we did with Equity Bank right at the beginning, it was just recognizing that M-Pesa was the payment mechanism for delivering what those wanted to do.
Yeah, and you are completely opposed to Equity Bank's thin seam. Where is that standing now? Is it because, as Safaricom, you thought they were piggybacking, coming on and just riding on your shoulders instead of setting up their own systems?
No, I wasn't completely opposed to it. I was with James this morning. What I said was that I thought that there were some security risks, and that it needs to be addressed. That's what I said, and I've left it. I address those risks or not. I'm sure he has, but it's up to him.
So as long as that is fixed, you're good to go with them.
Well, it's not a condition of whether it's fixed or not. I mean, it's up to them to launch it when they want to launch it. It's not up to me.
Yeah. The Global Entrepreneurship Summit coming up in July. President Obama going to be in attendance, and a lot of leaders worldwide will be also coming into the country. And with the security threats in terms of Kenya being a place to invest, some people have had that and said, you know what, not too safe for us to do our business. What do you say as a business that has grown big in East and Central Africa now to those investors who'd want to come in here and set up shop?
So insecurity is a big concern, right? A big concern all over the place. But I would point out to people, which I was doing at the Milken Institute, had a conference a few weeks ago down in Los Angeles, and a lot of American investors were asking those questions. And my answer is that, look at Boko Haram. Boko Haram has been operating in northern Nigeria for 6 years. Nigeria has still enjoyed a growth rate in excess of 6%. It hasn't stopped growth. If you look out across the landscape here, you see how much construction is being done. You look at how many new hotels have been opened up in the past few years, and how many new hotels continue to be built in Westlands, down in Gigiri. It shows that there is a huge level of confidence in Kenya. And I had here on Monday an investor, a large Swedish investor, kind of multi-billionaire kind of investor with money, who is very keen on investing in East Africa and very keen on investing in Kenya in particular. And when I asked him about insecurity, because I want to invest in the long term, I'm not a hedge fund, I want to invest in the long term. Insecurity is a blip, and we get over that blip. And I think that all of the things the government is doing today around putting security solutions in place, I think is addressing those issues. And I find that the demand for our shares, and again, the demand for other shares, you pick KCB, you pick Equity Bank, those shares are in huge demand in foreign lands. And so people shouldn't be concerned about that.
About that. What is your expectation from GES as the world pretty much converges in Kenya?
My expectations aren't that high. If anything, I would just hope that people can really start to get an understanding of the intellectual capital that we have here in Kenya, and the smart young people who are doing some fantastic work, whether it's in iHub, but even forget about those incubation hubs for a minute. But just look at the stuff which is being generated by young Kenyans, and I think to really showcase it, and I talk about it a lot, and people talk to me a lot about it when I'm out of the country. People tell me about some of the stuff which is being done here, which is remarkable, and I really want, and not just in the ICT space, entrepreneurship. I can pick on Perpink. If you haven't found Perpink, just look them up. Perpink is two young people.
Yeah.
Two young kids, they're like 23 years old, came out of Strathmore, and they started a little business of customized gifts. So, I go online and say, I want to send a present to Sophie, and this is
what I want.
This is what she likes. So these are hobbies, this is how much you want to spend, and they will customize the gift, and they will deliver it to you at your office today.
Wow.
That's entrepreneurship. And, I often say Kenyans forget about your broken roads for a minute,
there's some great stuff.
And your lack of punctuality and all this stuff. There's some fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
Brightest people on the continent.
We've talked about M-Pesa, but a quick question, because there are those who wonder about the story, the origin, the genesis of M-Pesa.
So lots of talk about who invented it. It was invented by a guy called Nick Hughes. And if you'll pick one guy, the daddy of M-Pesa is Nick Hughes, who also incidentally happens to be the chairman for M-Copa, because Nick then went on to invent this solar power solution, which utilizes M-Pesa. So he's the bright guy behind it. But it's been launched in lots of other countries, and the only place that's really, really worked successful is here in Kenya, which allows me to go and hang out with Bill Gates.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge Safaricom is facing now?
I would say it's, and I'm going to be really honest on this one, I would say is that we run a risk of becoming a little bit detached from our customers, and I'm trying to fix that problem right now.
Detached how? In what sense?
We've started to run the business from head office, and that's not how Safaricom grew up. Safaricom grew up on the ground, and as I've traveled around, you go to Kakamega, you go down to the coast, you go to Kisumu, you go wherever, you get the sense that we have become a little bit detached, and I think that's very wrong. And this year, our primary focus is actually to get back in touch with those customers, really right to the grassroots, and to stop thinking that everybody drives a Prado and lives in Kileleshwa.
Okay.
It's not like that.
They say when you're at the top, you should be very worried, because the only other place to go is down. Many people look at you and you are at the top of your game. So what are you doing to either delay the fall, stop the fall if it's stoppable, or just stay on up there longer? I
think most companies these days have recognized that you have to innovate your way. You have to innovate your way out of, innovate your way into self-disruption, right? And what I mean by that is that don't wait for someone else or something else to disrupt. And the reason why many companies today are not actually that worried about their competitors, because their traditional competitors aren't the ones who will disrupt them. Come back to the taxi industry across the world. It was black cabs versus yellow cabs versus, now it's not that at all. You take hotels. Once upon a time, it was Radisson competing against Sheraton. Today, it's not. Today, it's Sheraton competing against a guy who's got a spare room in his house. And actually, Airbnb, if you, again, look it up if you haven't encountered it.
Yeah.
Airbnb hardly has anybody working for them. But what they do is they have access to all these people who have a spare room in their house, and when people are traveling, when the new millennials are traveling, they don't necessarily want to stay in a hotel. They're quite happy to come and stay in your spare room. And so suddenly, Airbnb has access to a hell of a lot more rooms than any of the conventional hotels have today without owning anything. And so there's a disruption which has come from, I've met the guy who started Airbnb. There's some young kid somewhere who just figures out, well, I've got a spare room, why don't I just rent it out?
Right. So you've mentioned, I'll take you back to that because it's very important. One of the challenges you see is the detachment from your customers. We've seen top level management, some of them leave. Is some of that what informed them leaving the organization?
It's always a difficult thing to talk about people leaving an organization because it's a very personal thing. And one which shouldn't really be discussed on TV. But you've asked the question, and I think that I'm moving my whole organization, which is not an easy thing to do, shifting that whole organization from that complacency that they've stepped into, way back down to the ground. And so my general managers, if I find that they're in the office more than 2 days a week, it means they're not doing their job. If they're not out in the field, they'll tell you that some of them were in Narok the other day, and people were chasing them out of the out of the street. You've lost touch with me. You don't care about me anymore. You've done Tetemesha and Banyeza and all those big things, but what have you done for me? And I think it's a very fair question. It's a very fair question because 23 million customers have been loyal to us, and we're still attracting new customers. Last year we added 8% new customers. So new customers are still coming, and they're coming for the right reasons because we do have a bigger and a better network. But we really do need to understand them a lot more than we understand them today, and we need to meet their needs quite specifically.
Quite specifically. So as we wind up, when you're out and about, what's the most ridiculous thing that people ask you? Do they come and say, hey, Bob, call me more, some airtime, please? What are some of the things you get?
Bob, call me more. It reminds me of one individual who constantly does that.
Yeah.
And he, the deputy president continues to call me Bob, call me more, and he does ask me for airtime as well.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Mr. Deputy President, if you're looking, you will stop calling me Bob, call me more now.
Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, I think when I'm out there, people are pretty friendly. It's surprising how friendly they can be, even people who are not my customers.
Yeah.
Because I think Safaricom still has a lot of admiration. There's a lot of trust. And we can't betray that trust. We mess up sometimes, and in recent months, we've messed up a few times in tariffing and things like that. I think recent examples, the data bundle story. That was messing up on the communication. We had intended to do the right thing, but we didn't. We're still experiencing some issues with the big box. And so we're trying to fix those, and we're engaging with the customers. When we, a year ago, we said we would stop the caribou tariff. And when the time came that we would stop it, then we messed up with how we communicated that, and give the impression that we wanted to take people's minutes, or resources we call it, take their minutes back away from them that they paid for, which of course you can't take their minutes. They paid for the damn minutes, So they're the kind of things we mess up. But, I'm hoping that customers recognize that at least we respond quickly to fix it. And on Twitter they tell me when I get it wrong, which is good.
And you pulled sponsorship from rugby. Why, and who will you, if any, of the other teams will you be sponsoring? So
rugby was, we weren't happy with some of the ethical discussions that were on the way. Richard was appointed as chairman more recently. I see Richard is cleaning things out. In fact, I called him before I off my travels recently.
Right.
And we'll meet and we'll talk about how we move forward. So we haven't walked away from rugby forever. We just says that until you guys sort yourself out. And I'm confident that Umbrella is actually getting on top of that issue. Okay.
So you're going to take your sponsorship back, or?
No, I'm saying we could.
You could.
So if that's interpreted as Safaricom reaching out, then fine. I think that he knows what he has to do. And I think he's doing it. And so we could come back in.
What has been your most embarrassing moment?
The 40-40 dance, I think, comes pretty close to that. And it was probably exemplified when my mother called me from the UK and said to me, hey, I've just seen you do the 40-40 dance. Just that kind of.
So do a little bit. Let's see, for those who don't remember.
I would, but I'm strapped to the chair.
You're not strapped to the
chair. Sound, with the sound thing, so unfortunately I'm not able to do that.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you. Asante sana. Yeah?
Which I commissioned from this artist, Samuel Gitu.
Right.
And Samuel paints, if you look at this, he doesn't paint with a brush. He paints with a knife.
Knife?
It's a knife. It's not a brush. And it's a very Van Gogh kind of style.
Yeah.
And he's famous for me. The imagery of this, the bread baskets, is what he does very well. And because this wall is curved, I couldn't have one big picture, or else I have one long, giraffe. Yeah. And so I commissioned him to do something because I wanted to, you constantly have to be reminded. It's what I said in the interview just now. You constantly have to be reminded who you're running this company for. And interestingly, I don't run the company for the shareholders. Yeah. I run the company for this guy, for these guys. Right? And so whatever decisions, because most of my work actually isn't sitting at this chair, it's sitting over there. Most of my work, I'm looking at these guys. And so when Sylvia comes into me with a proposition, which she's going to do at some point this afternoon, to come and talk about a new proposition, I want to know how it's going to affect these guys. Yeah. Because this is what Safaricom is about.